Well, last week, the federal court ruled that the Gillard government's live cattle export ban back in 2011 was unlawful, labelling it specifically as capricious. It was vindication for the industry, who saw massive losses as a result of the ban. The Northern Territory-based Brett Cattle Company, who led the class action, claims it suffered losses of at least $2.5 million as a result. And while the coalition have long criticised the actions of Julia Gillard's government, and specifically the then Agricultural Minister, Senator Jo Ludwig, for banning the trade outright, the government have now signalled they're likely to appeal the decision. Leader of the Nationals in the Senate, the Honourable Bridget McKenzie, joins me now. Bridget, I know you've been a long advocate for the bush. You're a senator who represents country Victoria, but surely your government, having been against this when you were in opposition, shouldn't be putting farmers through any further hardship here. The compensation's got to be paid, shouldn't it?
Oh, Peter, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we really welcomed the decision that was handed down last week as a vindication of the arguments we ran in 2011 when Jo Ludwig made his reckless decision to shut the trade down, a $1 billion trade that employed tens of thousands of Australians right throughout its supply chain overnight, destroying lives and livelihoods. And we saw not just the economic impacts flow through those communities over the years subsequent to that decision, but the social impacts, families, family breakdown, suicides and the like, as people worked through the implications of this terrible decision. And it was Tony Abbott, Liberal Senator Chris Back and the National Party that really took it up to Jo Ludwig and the Gillard Labor government at the time. And we see, as National Party senators, last week's decision by Justice Rare as a vindication of the argument we put, and obviously the claims of compensation now upwards of $600 million to maybe more than 300 plaintiffs. The claim hasn't closed yet, is something that we need to rectify. It's been 9 long years that pastoralists, truckies and other affected parties have been dealing with this. And as you recall, Peter, it wasn't just damage here at home to our agricultural industries and regional communities, but it was significant damage to one of our key trading partners, Indonesia, on the eve of Ramadan. Incredible.
I remember I went to Jakarta, and then I went to a lot of the outlying island areas. I visited abattoirs. We saw pens and yards and fattening areas where underweight Australian cattle, deliberately underweight Australian cattle, were shipped to Indonesia, and there was an industry then for Indonesians to fatten them up before they were slaughtered.
Yep.
I've been to plenty of abattoirs in Australia. I thought the abattoirs, at least we were shown, were the same sort of composite qualities and cleanliness as you'd find in Australia. So why the appeal?
Well, that's a question for government. I mean, we're requesting, the National Party party room is requesting Christian Porter, the Attorney-General. Obviously, we've got the Agriculture Minister in David Littleproud to actually discuss this with the party room. I think as National Party senators, we moved a motion in the Senate today to actually show our support for not just the cattle live export industry, but the sheep export industry. No surprise, the Greens voted against it. But the height of hypocrisy was the Labor Party standing with us when for so long they fought to shut down the trade in that reaction to, the ABC Four Corners. What we've been able to do
You're a lot stronger. Bridget, you're a lot stronger on this point, though, I have to say, than the National Party Agriculture Minister, David Littleproud. Has he given you any comfort that he is going to be able to turn the mind of his other Liberal cabinet colleagues to let the farmers get what's owed to them?
Well, I hope so. I mean, we're here as National Party senators, MPs, to stand up for rural and regional Australia, our industries, which are the backbone of our communities, but indeed the nation. So I lead a fantastic team in the Senate, Matt Canavan, Susie McDonald, a beef producer from Queensland, Sam McMahon from the CLP, when we saw the Northern Territory cattlemen were so strong on this issue, and she's been incredibly powerful. She said she will not be wanting to see this decision appealed, and she's been out front and centre. And we as a five, Perrin Davey also from New South Wales, we absolutely support compensation. We support the decision. We do believe it was misfeasance. We do believe that Jo Ludwig willfully and recklessly ignored the advice he was given. He didn't seek alternative options. It's a very high bar to prove misfeasance. I'm no lawyer, but those I've spoken to assure me it is. This was a unique set of circumstances. And it's been 9 long years that our primary producers have been waiting for justice to be done.
And I'd also make this point, I think, for people to understand. Jo Ludwig's long left the parliament. He's acting as a barrister in Queensland. They, the taxpayers, you at home, have paid for this legal case to be run in his name against these exporters. Taxpayers have paid, I'm told, in and around $2 million defending the indefensible. These exporters who took on this case have paid their end themselves. They risked a huge financial hit themselves should they have lost to the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth backed by the taxpayer. They're not backed by anyone but themselves. I just don't understand if Christian Porter, the Attorney General, wants to disagree with a minor point of law, well, fine, he can appeal the point of law. But why doesn't the government come out now and say, regardless of the point of law that we might differ with, we will pay compensation. You can pay it as an ex gratia payment that doesn't have any bearing on the decision, and set up the regime now to pay that $600 million so people are not put through the cost and the uncertainty and the mental anguish, I have to say, already been 10 years, of another round of appeals.
Look, Peter, you make a really good point. I think, we're going to have Christian Porter to the party room on Monday to discuss in greater detail the government's position, because, as you know, they haven't made it incredibly clear how they're going to deal with this appeal. We stand with the National Farmers Federation and the Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association welcoming this decision and this unique set of circumstances that led to it. We're appalled by the Labor Party's, again, lack of appreciation for our primary producers. And I guess our side of government really needs to stand with our primary producers and say this is never going to happen again. And also, given that our Indonesian Economic Partnership Agreement begins in a couple of weeks on the 5th of July, to really reinforce the fact that as a trading nation and a great supplier of beautiful red Australian beef to Indonesia, that governments in the future can no longer overnight shut off your protein supply, like that they can have confidence. So, I welcome the decision. The National Party Senate team welcomes this decision and hope that the government comes out quickly to give our primary producers confidence, as you say, and comfort that all of this fight has actually been worth it.
Yeah, well, I'll say to you again, shame on the coalition if it is appealed. You can make ex gratia payments and still deal with the point of law, and I hope that's what's raised certainly next week when you get in and around this issue. Just before we go, I was reading today there's some talk that the AEC, the Electoral Commission, will do a boundary redistribution in Northern Territory, which could end up with one seat in the territory only. There's currently 2 lower house seats. And if that, and this is because of population movements, obviously, but the National Party are standing firm and they want to support the territory holding on to 2 seats. You could then get basically the perversion, though, where votes in the NT are worth differently, worth different amounts, value, one man, one vote, one value, than, say, a vote in anywhere else in the country. Is that your view?
Well, it's the view, I guess, because Senator McMahon from the CLP, as part of our National Party team, feels very, very strongly that the NT, being as large as it is and dispersed and sparsely populated as it is, needs to maintain the 2 lower house seats that it holds at the moment. One, obviously, being in the very densely populated capital city of Darwin, and then you have the rest of the NT serviced by 1 MP. I think there is something to say about the engagement in a Liberal democracy with your local Member of Parliament. How do they meet their constituents? How do constituents actually let their local MP know the issues of concern to them? And at some point, size does matter, Peter. And so we've made a decision as a National Party Senate team to back Senator McMahon and the private senators bill, which wants to see those 2 lower house seats maintained in the Northern Territory.
Right, I've got to leave it there. Bridget McKenzie, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Go Cats.
Go Cats, there you go.